Hello and welcome to a Taylor's Tales podcast. This is Chris's Corner. I'm your host, Chris Taylor, and welcome back to a brand new episode. This week, Austin is an NFT. What am I talking about? Well, I've visited Austin, Texas. I was there for, I think, a total of 4 days, and now I am currently in Dallas, Texas. This week, it's really going to be a focus on how travel can go from, really interesting, fast-paced, to a point where you really don't have anything to do. And what you do in those slow moments can actually deter you from how good the trip has been so far. So, what do I mean by that? Well, for me, I found Austin, Texas to be quite dull. And maybe that's because it's been overhyped from all of the podcasters talking about it and how there's been a news element around the place and how a lot of people have moved towards it. Well, for me personally, I found there was little to do. And to quote Tim Dillon, Austin is an NFT. It doesn't exist.
Austin's an NFT.
It
doesn't exist.
No. If you
It's not real.
Or as he'll call it, and I'll get him to play the clip now, Austin is...
The city of Austin, Texas, and I want to go on record here,
Okay, I'm not... Go.
is a dump.
That's right, a dump. And I don't think that. I think it's just that it reminds me very much of where I'm from Reading. It's I will call Reading a shithole, but it's not really. It's just boring. There's nothing going on there. There's very little people action. There's very little things for young people to do there. All the thing is drinking and so-called live music. Or, again, I quote Tim Little on this, it's a bunch of heroin addicts busking in multiple bars, and they're just nobodies. But whatever. Play the clip.
There's 2 streets downtown where everybody gets drunk and shoots each other, and then...
So for me personally, the clips are a little bit extreme from Tim, but they do actually, he is saying a lot of sense. And for me personally, after visiting Austin, I feel like Rogan and the rest of them, it's a family place. That's what it is. It makes sense now. It's for raising kids. It's a quiet place. There's very little to do there. It's safe-ish. There's still a homeless problem. So from the last podcast, I did talk about that and say that if I got to Texas and found that there was a homeless problem still, I was going to be annoyed. And it is still here. So it turns out that I've spoken to a couple of different travelers, and it just seems to me that the USA has a problem in general, and that this is not uncommon for people from Europe to come over to the US and find that that is a common issue, and that it can be a little bit daunting, a little bit deterring from how you look back on the USA. And for me personally, I had no idea. There is nothing on the news to tell you about this. There's no real sort of information being given out that tells you to the average traveller that the US has a problem with homeless. And also, for those thinking of travelling to the US, I'm actually going to be really harsh here and say that the hostel situation in comparison to travelling through Europe and through Southeast Asia and through basically anywhere that's on the Traveller's Guide, you're going to find that it's actually a lot less of an atmosphere in comparison to travelling through those areas. You're going to find you're going to meet less people. There's not much of what I would call camaraderie. There's very much less just all-round people traveling to the US, and I know why. One of those reasons being is that the hostels are well overpriced for what you're getting. There's a lack of atmosphere, as I said in the first place. There's also a lack of a trail. There's a lack of a traveler's trail to go through the country. You just go to the places that you think may be interesting, and in the case of Australia, for instance, you know the main hubs. For instance, in Mexico, there is a traveler's route that you can go from either Mexico City or Cancun and get to the other side, and you know the general gist of where you're going to go. It's not the case here, and I don't think that the USA has generally focused in on the tourist side, maybe the traveling side, the younger person's traveling side to the USA. $40 a night for what I paid in Denver was well overpriced. You're getting a bunk bed, which I was paying something like 200 pesos a night for. I think it's even less than that. It may be 100 pesos or something for certain places, and you're getting the exact same quality. If I'm going to be honest, Mexico hostels they provided a free breakfast as well, and for half the price. So you've got to consider here that these things really are big factors when you are choosing to travel to the USA. I've spent double what I was spending in Mexico, maybe even triple. And yes, I've been to Yosemite, and I've seen a show in Las Vegas and stayed in a nice hotel in Vegas. But those three things shouldn't mean I'm spending triple the amount that I'm spending in Mexico. And to the average traveler, this may sound like I'm moaning. I'm not. I'm just giving you information and telling my tale of how I've experienced the USA. And I've loved California, and I've loved. I really enjoyed the experience of Las Vegas, even if it was overpriced. Denver and Austin, a little bit of a letdown, a little bit of wind out of my sails. So it's lovely to come to Dallas and find there's art here. There's the assassination memorial for JFK. There's a tower to go visit to be able to see the entirety of the entire city of Dallas. And there's also the farmers market, which again, that's a little bit like, it's not really a farmers market. It's more a bunch of modern shops next to each other within a building rather than an actual market, which I can see. I don't know, it's closed down now, but outside there's an actual proper market that nobody talks about, which is much better. Those little ones, the hidden gems that you can find within traveling, those are the ones that you really want to find and are important to share the information on. I'm currently staying at Deep Ellum Hostel in Dallas, and it's pretty standard. Again, it's just the pricing for what you're getting. It's not what you'd think, especially for the price you're paying. Also, I'd like to point out that something that I've shared and talked to about with people I've traveled with and spoke to in the US is that there seems to be a lot of people from the US staying in these hostels, which I'm not used to. It's normally travelers from around the world rather than those of the native country. Completely different here. Apparently it's just common for people to stay in the hostel if you're from the US, traveling throughout the US, which I'm not used to. I have stayed in hostels in the UK, and I felt kind of weird doing it, because it was very much a traveler's hostel for people outside of the UK to come in and stay in. So food for thought on those things there. There's also a very strong smell of weed throughout the US because it's legal in a lot of places. I don't know if that puts a lot of people off or if it makes you think, but there's also, you got to be careful. You got to be on your wits, which I'm not used to, if I'm honest. I had the expectation within Mexico because I was like, there's the cartel and there's the corrupt police. I was expecting poverty and expecting things like that. But coming to the US, it's been a little bit of a, oh, wow. This is a completely different reality. This is a completely different type of first world country. And it's made me really appreciate what I have at home and also appreciate the places I've visited before where I haven't had to think about this. Going through Europe, going through Southeast Asia, going through Australasia, going through basically even Mexico in that terms. And to some extent, I'm really looking forward to going to places like Japan, where there's also, it's a first world country, but it's also got a little bit of a different style of being a first world country. So I'm looking forward to that. Not that I'm, non-appreciating my travels at the moment, because I've found that the best lesson is the lesson you learn from the loss rather than from the win. That's always something that you come back from, make you even more powerful than you already were. So this is really important to come to grips with, especially when you are over halfway. I am currently 20 days into my travel of the USA, and my favourite places are yet to come. I should say my favourite place. I will be going to the USA, to New York City within the USA, and New York City, as I've said before on the podcast, is probably one of my favourite places on earth. Maybe because of the chaos, but also because of the ability to walk and get public transport anywhere, the amazing food, the constant... anything can happen, but also there's so much to see. I'm spending 6 days there, and last time I was there for a week and I felt like I hadn't even scratched the surface of New York. So I'm so glad to go back. I'm also going to be seeing Washington DC, which will be interesting to see. I'm not really a political person, but I can appreciate the statues and the monuments and the history behind the country. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. If I do have to get down to the nitty-gritty of things as well, is that I've also realized the California overhyping of how bad it got is I think podcasters, again, I'm not naming names, but have well overhyped the sort of issues with California. Yes, there's a mask mandate, but it's very much like anywhere in Europe. And yes, there is a homeless issue, but they are trying their best to clean it up. I actually think California as a place has a lot more to do than the entirety of Texas, and that's me being nice, I think. And I think that California, yes, it has the mask mandate and it no longer has the mask mandate, but you, out of your own choice, most places will ask you to wear it, very much like in the United Kingdom. I think here the stuff you see there outweighs the problems that it has in comparison to Texas, not having any of the mask mandate and having a much lower cases of homelessness. It also just has very little to do in comparison. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh because I don't drink, and I'm not really, if it's not pop punk or rock, I'm not going to go and see it live. And I can appreciate the amazing brisket and food that's being served, but apart from that, it's kind of a letdown. So it's good for me to experience this so that I can get it out there for other travelers that maybe you want to come here, depending on what you like. Maybe if you're into the rougher sort of life in terms of going down gun ranges or anything along those lines, then that could be there as well. But there's also the ability to see stuff. And as much as I love going down to photograph JFK and the grassy knoll, which is amazing, like I loved going around there this morning, you can probably get a lot of the stuff done in Dallas, for instance, within either a morning or a full day. I'm lucky enough, I'm kind of glad that I'm only here for 2 days, today and tomorrow, and then I'm off on Monday to Washington, DC. That tomorrow I'm just going to use as a day to edit the podcast, upload the podcast, go for a run, and basically just relax. But that gives you a kind of a glimpse, and I've even added in gym sessions yesterday and today when I got to Dallas. So you incorporate that and you're thinking to yourself, well, there's a lot of time for those who, for instance, don't want to go to the gym, don't eat as much as me, so they're not going to as many places to eat. So you've got to think that you've got the tower, I think it's called the Revolution Tower, something along those lines, but you've got the Kennedy assassination area, you've got the artwork that's around Deep Ellum and the Dallas area, but you've also got the farmers market, maybe if you're into that sort of thing, into the quote unquote modern farmers market. But it's kind of like, apart from that, and then Austin has 2 streets and they're mainly for drinking, and that's it. And you've got, maybe if you want to go kayaking, that's on the river. I already had been kayaking in San Diego, and I don't think I could have been in San Diego's beautiful oceanfront kayaking, so I wasn't going to sort of lower the standard of what I'd seen beforehand and dampen a memory, rather than, for instance, what I did do was I went into this weird museum, and there's a saying, keep Austin weird, and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of a nicety, really. There's nothing weird about Austin. It's pretty, that'd be like me saying plain Greek yogurt's weird. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, it's just plain. There's nothing weird about it. But I think it's trying to be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek than it actually is, but that's my opinion. And like I said, I went to the Weird Museum, which was basically sort of statues and wax figures of like Dracula, sort of dark, comical, circus people, Nosferatu, like I said, Dracula, and people like that. Nothing serious, like monsters. It was quite fun. I was there for an hour, and then I went and played some mini golf again. I was just finding anything to do that was potentially there that you could do on a cheap price. Like, I mean, you could, for instance, go horseback riding maybe if you've got the money, but that's really out of your way. You'd have to get an Uber to get to the location, come back. There's a couple of other things, but I felt like, again, I stayed at this place called the Firehouse Hostel as well, and that probably had the best atmosphere I've seen so far in terms of like people talking to one another in a hostel, and that, even then, very small communal area, kind of like 2 benches, and then that was it. And kind of, should it be like that? No, definitely not. It should be a massive communal area where everyone's kind of forced to be into and communicate. Like I said with Sand Crystal Ball, the ability to all be in the same area forces people to communicate, get to know each other, share stories, and share advice. Like I said with this podcast, this is really important to have the downside as well as the upside, so that people can understand where not to go as much as it is important to know where to go. And that can be a big thing for people, the make or break holiday sort of thing. So there it is on that one. So Austin is definitely overhyped, in my opinion. I would say skip it altogether. For me personally, I know that loads of YouTubers and people have moved there. I can understand why it's quiet. There's nothing, like, if you're trying to live your 9-to-5 life there, basically, then it's going to be great, because you don't have to worry about the maniac of tourists coming to visit it. But the idea that it's the next New York or the next Los Angeles, again, I think Tim Dillon hit it on the nail on the head. It is no way is it going to be that in any way, shape or form, because it's barely a city. It reminds me, like I said, of Reading at home. It's a town that wants to be a city. And maybe I'm being a little bit over the top, but whatever. Got to get my opinion out there and in some fashion or form, basically. And maybe it's unfounded and unwanted opinion, but I hope that for my friends who are listening, you guys know that maybe don't come here. Maybe if you do, if you're a drinker, but even then, even if you're a drinker, there's only 2 streets in Austin to drink on, and then once you've done that, what are you going to do next? And if there's no comedians or live music in town that you like, that very much the statement of it, the live music capital of the world, kind of goes down to the pan. So, moving on from Texas. Texas was a learning experience for me, and the USA hostel system has also been a big learning experience for me as well, in terms of really appreciating what I had in Mexico, but also having the appreciation for sticking to the traveler's trail. And I think that's sometimes important. It's very much overlooked when somebody does the same as everyone else. A lot of the time we always think to ourselves, if someone else is doing it, I don't want to do it because that's not very cool, that's not very unique, and that's not going to get those Instagram likes or whatever people do nowadays. I think let's turn it back a bit. If there is a traveler's trail and it's a known trail, then do walk upon it, because you will find gems within it on your own and doing it your own way. For instance, when I visited Bangkok, I went out on my own and just explored the city and did it on foot, and did it in a way that very few people do it. And I saw Bangkok in a very different light compared to a lot of other travelers, who a lot of people say that it's not as, it's not fun to visit. Some people love it, some people hate it. I loved it from seeing it from a very different point of view, that it was not as much a shopper's paradise and vulgar in its sexual desires, or more as a place of beauty, peace, and good food and good coffee, for that matter. Although they use condensed milk for the coffee, that was kind of weird. So I'm still getting over that, even though it was 4 years ago. Nonetheless, point being is this: when you go on the traveler's trail and you have something that other people have done and they've given you the advice to go there, take it, because most of the time it's good advice and it comes from a good place of heart. And from there, you can then find your own trail and your own off-the-road, off-the-cuff places to visit and make it your own. And that's very different to how a lot of people would advise you. Maybe most people would say find your own unique way in life. In traveling the world and finding new places is very easy for you, or maybe it's not so easy. So take this advice and go from there. Or don't take it and therefore, come to the US and enjoy that ability to be amongst the boringness that was Austin. So you may or may not take this advice, and that's fine, because we all see the world in our own way, and that's important, to be able to have your own travels that you can say to other people and really hold on to as a memory. For instance, one of my favourite things this morning was trying something as silly as chicken waffles and bacon and eggs this morning, a very American breakfast, not very good for me, but I did make sure that I got a solid gym session in and 20,000 steps to try and burn off those calories. One of the things that I have not been expecting since being in the US is the amount of walking I'll be doing, and the amount of steps I was getting in, and the amount of food that I'd need to get in to replace those calories, and how hungry I was getting, and how tired I was getting at the end of the days because of the lack of nutrients, and making sure that I was not under eating all the time. And one thing I was finding was that I was quite sleepy a lot of the time, because of the interrupted sleep sometimes within hostels with people snoring and all these things, and that can really interfere with your need or want to be able to find new places, and that's important, especially when you are traveling, to be able to have that appreciation for new places and getting on the road and trying to go out and find somewhere. So, as I said, Austin, Dallas, I'm putting them behind me. I'm really looking forward to seeing Washington. The next podcast will be within New York City. New York, I've got 6 days in, so there's going to be so much to talk. It's just going to revolve all around New York next podcast, because I think that it's going to be such an uplifting one because of the amount of love I have for that city. Central Park, the coastline where Mr. Robot was filmed in the arcade area, and the equivalent of Santa Monica, I call it, for New York. It's going to be very cold as well. It's going to be a different way of me seeing New York. Last time I was there, it was 30 degrees hot, and I'd only packed for winter gear at the time because it was April. And I'd gone to Iceland and Canada, which were -4 degrees. And now I'm properly packed, ready to go for the wintry cold, the minus degrees, and as well as the 5-degree heat that will be the middle of winter for New York City and Washington DC. Very much like the crazy storm that's going on back in England, Storm Eunice, which seems to have torn down a few fences and ruined a few houses, and I am very glad not to be back in the UK at the moment, where probably the worst storm that people have seen in over 100 years, probably not 100 years, but 50 years, has hit the coastline of the UK. So I am very much appreciating my ability to be in the United States rather than in the United Kingdom. So this has been a very quick podcast orientating around the ups and downs of traveling, the sort of realization, appreciation for when you have something and you don't understand how good you have it at the time. So, this has been a Taylor's Tales podcast. This has been Chris's Corner. I'm your host, Chris Taylor, and as always, I'll see you around, and I hope to see you this time next week. Bye now.
And the city of Austin will be what it has always been, an uninteresting dullard.